right. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're joining us. Got a lot of great libraries here that are getting ready to welcome their community with these lovely books. And we can't wait to hear how other libraries have used them. We have Kirsten and Pam with us from I'm Your Neighbor Books. And we are excited to hear a little bit more about their organization and also what they've learned in the process. And I am going to go ahead and let you take it away, Kirsten.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Settle in. I hope you've got tea, coffee, and all things bubbly. Donna asked us to do about 20 or 30 minutes of professional development, and then we will have questions. Donna is nice enough to say that she is going to gather up your questions and organize them in the chat and run the Q&A at the end, but feel free to put things in as you think of them. And I am just simply going to move through some of the research and some of the components of the Welcoming Library. So there should be a vocabulary word for the awkward sharing of the screen stage. Okay, everybody can see. All right. So, your welcoming libraries, they should all have arrived. We've been tracking them across the country. Pam and I are sitting up here in a cloudy, rainy day in the state of Maine. All the maple trees are changing, and we are surrounded by orange and yellows and reds. Your welcoming library was envisioned, built, and innovated by a group of immigrant leaders, public librarians, children's book authors, and advocates who are part of this growing nonprofit, I'm Your Neighbor Books. The nonprofit strives to build a stronger nation, one where immigrants are welcomed and where first through generation Americans truly belong. We do this work by facilitating deep engagement with the children's books that represent our new arrival and new generation communities. So the Welcoming Library relies on the immersive power of picture books to introduce patrons to our asylee, refugee, immigrant, and new generation neighbors. Sharing these picture books can deliver a crucial sense of recognition and belonging to new arrival families and provide long-term individuals and families with the cultural competency and empathy needed to truly connect with new neighbors. While the majority of the books in your welcoming library are set in very specific immigrant and new generation communities, I thought I would open by reading aloud to you. You do all that work reading aloud to everybody else. We thought we would read aloud to you. This one is not set in a community, obviously, but a really stunning allegory story. This is The Suitcase by Chris Nello Ballesteros, published by Houghton Mifflin. A strange animal arrived one day, looking dusty and tired, sad and frightened. He was pulling a big suitcase. Hey, hi there. What's in your suitcase? My suitcase? Well, there's a teacup. A teacup? That's a pretty big suitcase for a little teacup. Yes, I suppose it is. But there's a table for my teacup and a wooden chair for me to sit in, too. There's a table and a chair in your suitcase? Impossible. Well, it's his suitcase. But a table and chair, really? Yes. And there's a little kitchen and a wooden cabin where I make my tea. That's my home. It's on a hillside surrounded by trees, and on a clear day, you can see the sea. It's all there in my suitcase. But I'm sorry. I'm really very, very tired. I've been traveling for a long time and come a long way. I must have a little rest. What a strange animal. I've never seen anything like him before. Well, neither have I, but we really should let him sleep for a while. Well, I don't trust him. How do we know he's telling the truth? There's only one way to find out. Someone pass me a big rock. We're going to open up the suitcase and see what's inside. Maybe we should. We need to know the truth. You can't do that. It's not ours. In no time at all, the suitcase was open. See, a broken teacup and an old photograph. He lied to us. Well, no, he did say there was a teacup. Yes, and now the suitcase is broken too. What will he think of us? Meanwhile, the sleeping stranger dreamed about running away and hiding, about climbing over mountains and swimming across deep waters. And he dreamed of his suitcase and all he had inside it. When he finally woke up, he couldn't believe what the other animals had done. I'm sorry I broke your suitcase. We fixed it the best we could. And we've been busy while you were sleeping. We hope you like it. Thank you. It's perfect. There's just one little problem. We're gonna need more teacups. I share this book because it demonstrates the potential challenges and rewards of welcoming immigrants. And I'd like to explore that a little bit more with you. So, the bird, rabbit, and fox are exhibiting a very human nervousness in response to the arrival of someone they perceive as different. Psychologists call this feeling intergroup anxiety, and it's something we all feel at some point. Encountering someone who seems very unfamiliar, we may wonder, consciously or not, do we have any way to communicate? Do we have anything in common? And even sometimes, am I safe? If uninterrupted and unresolved over time, this anxiety can become the foundation for prejudice to develop. So, what can we do to interrupt and resolve it? Contact. Now, decades of research on contact theory, I do love to read this stuff, I may be the only one, have established that such encounters, if people have opportunities to get to know each other, the sense of strangeness dissolves and anxiety lessens. Attitudes can shift, and the potential for a positive relationship increases. And it can happen vicariously through an extended or indirect contact. We all know that and do that work every day with books. In a recent study conducted by our advisor, Dr. Krista Aronson of Bates College, she found that when children were read books featuring characters of different races or cultures having fun together, their intergroup anxiety was reduced, resulting in lower levels of prejudice. So how does the suitcase itself demonstrate these psychological concepts on welcoming? We can agree that these long-term citizens exhibited pretty acute intergroup anxiety, and that their unchecked anxiety led to an act of prejudice, the breaking of the suitcase. But the turning point for the book, and I think for all of us in libraries in the nation, was what they discovered in the suitcase. The suitcase contains a bit of a story, or the beginning of a truer narrative about the strange animal. We see the shards of a teacup, proving that the immigrant had not lied, and a photograph. That photograph not only confirmed the immigrant's story of a house on a hill, but showed the animal at home, happy with body, mind, and voice, safe and prospering. That photograph told a story that was different from the citizen's first observation of him as dusty, tired, sad, and frightened. The photo told a fuller story about the strange animal. And with that fuller story, the citizens' anxiety dissolves and they manifest a significant act of welcoming, building the animal's new home. With this act, the animal begins to belong where his country's political, economic, or environmental climate has forced him to resettle. Now, the last line of the book is, "We're gonna need more teacups," which I have written above my desk. This country is being transformed by immigration, and I imagine you are feeling the need for more teacups or tools to create libraries and communities where we all belong. One of those many tools you now have at your disposal is the Welcoming Library. So let's look at how it can reduce intergroup anxiety and increase welcoming and belonging. The centerpiece of the Welcoming Library is this collection of 30 curated picture books representing the modern lives of immigrants, refugees, and their new generations. With this collection, I'm Your Neighbor Books recasts the national image of migration. I use the word recast intentionally because for many Americans, the image of immigration is an image of Ellis Island. And in most schools, when we teach immigration, we teach Ellis Island. I really believe that when we exclusively teach historical white migration from Europe, we can elevate the centrality of white America and we can other the multicultural and multiracial community of modern migrants in their generations. So featuring non-European families from Afghanistan to Guatemala to Haiti to Somalia, the Welcoming Library's books cross many borders and span several generations. I'm Your Neighbor Books has done its best to pull together a collection that reflects your local immigrant community. Now, holes in the collection remain. For example, we are desperate for titles representing the Central African experience as the diaspora from that region continues, especially on the East Coast. As now Welcoming Library ambassadors, Pam and I will share with you each new community, each new book that's added to the Welcoming Library, so your collection can continually evolve. So your Welcoming Library is not just a collection of migration books, but it's a collection of books designed to migrate. It can move between your branches, local schools, community centers, and faith groups. The Welcoming Library is packed in 2 red crates to facilitate circulation. One crate holds this pop-up book display, and the unit unites the individual family stories on one set of shelves and under one multilingual banner. Additionally, your banner says "I'm Your Neighbor" in 10 different languages and then invites readers to read to welcome and read to belong. Clearly, the second crate holds all your picture books. You know, we designed the Welcoming Library as a traveling collection because we wanted to get it in as many locations as possible, but it's had a really interesting side effect that I want to talk to you about, which is the limited loan period to branches, to schools, to community groups acts as a disruption of practice. Because the collection is only in-house for a limited time, branch libraries look for ways to increase their programming and outreach to the immigrant community, and schools revise their teaching. I wanted to share a recent example of a Welcoming Library disrupting practice. The collection was in an elementary school because of a collaboration with their public library. For decades, the teachers and parents in this school have collaborated on an annual celebration of nations. The nations celebrated have always been primarily European countries, with occasionally Mexico thrown in. A parent who'd been reading through all the Welcoming Library books suggested that this year, classrooms had to choose a country that someone in the city had emigrated from in the last 50 years. So suddenly the countries being studied were Vietnam, Burundi, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and others. Now, the same parent arranged for community members to come into classrooms as ambassadors. And the Vietnam classroom's ambassador was an elder who had come to the U.S. from Vietnam in the 1970s. The teacher pulled out the picture book A Different Pond from the welcoming library and read it to her class while the grandfather sat beside her. After she finished reading, she discovered that the grandfather was streaming tears. Asked if he was okay, he whispered, "I feel like I'm home for the very first time." That is the disruption of practice that I'm talking about. It's a disruption of the whites only immigration narrative. And I think these disruptions can be transformative for our communities. And why did this grandfather feel as if he was home for the very first time? And why did the book bring about that feeling? Your common sense as librarians show, and the research shows, that representation can create a solid sense of home and belonging. A Different Pond, which was released in 2017, and I'm sure you know it, was the first picture book to represent the war and displacement trauma of Vietnamese Americans, and most importantly, how that trauma is passed on to the first generation. The grandfather may have felt at home because he was seeing his home, his experience represented for the first time. And I love this, right? The opportunities that picture books give us to step out of the children's room and program in the presence of adults and with adults. I really highly recommend this book even for public libraries, even though Louise Eliaforte is talking about the classroom. She reminds us that recently arrived emergent multilingual families often have experienced trauma, and that trauma can threaten to drain a person's reservoir of self-knowing and resilience. She continues, though, that if a reservoir can be exhausted, it can also be filled. Research informs us that resilience can be taught, learned, and expanded. We can have an active role in empowering or repowering our students and community members. She quotes Usborne and de La Sablonnière, who are psychologists. This is a long quote, but I think it's important. Having a clear and confident understanding of one's cultural identity is important for psychological well-being, as it clarifies one's understanding of personal identity. A clear cultural identity clarifies one's personal existence by providing a clear normative template, reducing personal uncertainty, providing an individual sense of continuity, and buffering an individual against fear. Featuring books that represent your new arrival and new generation community members gives them a clear and confident understanding of one's cultural identity and builds resilience. So to make the patrons time with these picture books, and sometimes that's just 10 minutes. We encourage public libraries to not exclusively set this up in the children's room, but to move it throughout their space. Some of the most powerful things in public libraries have happened when this collection is up front, inviting people of all ages to spend 10 minutes immersed in the visual literacy of a picture book. So your welcoming libraries have this one crucial extra feature. Each of the titles has a set of discussion questions affixed to the end papers, written by our team and alongside of the author and or the illustrator or someone from the community for which the book represents. The questions invite readers of all backgrounds and ages to engage deeper in the text, to reflect on their commonalities with the characters, and to recognize unique cultural details. If we've done these questions right, they should work for readers from the long-term community, they should work with readers from the new arrival or new generation community, and they should work for most ages. So I wanted to go through a couple of the books and the companion discussion questions, just to introduce you to some of these titles. So, for all migrants, the universal is leaving behind all that is known for a journey into so many unknowns. In Storyboat, the girl keeps her brother safe in that wilderness of unknowns by using the objects they brought from home as anchors of imaginative play. The discussion question reads, the girl says, "This cup is a home." A cup cannot be a home, or can it? Make a list of objects, it's been a long day, that you think of when you think of home. Now look at the picture of the brother and sister with a cup. How is the cup their home? Some of the welcoming libraries titles do not gloss over the heartbreak of leaving. In Wishes, we take every agonizing step with a refugee girl and her family. While the book does not depict what has driven them from their home, the reader really feels the weight of the war, poverty, and persecution, the trauma that has led to this forced displacement, trauma that will always in some way remain with them. In the last pages of the book, the girl states, "And I wished I didn't have to wish anymore." What does this wish mean to the girl? How will her life have changed if she doesn't have to wish anymore? Do you think she may have new, different wishes someday? What is your wish for her? This is an incredible book and came out in March of 2020, so got lost in the COVID fray. A refugee's journey is not linear, nor will it always ending in resettlement. Of the world's 84 million displaced people, 25 million are classified by the UNHCR as refugees. The thing that we never seem to grasp is that less than 1% of the refugees are resettled. The parents in this Ethiopian refugee camp make sure their daughter Abia has a vibrant, loving childhood, despite the fact that they have no sense of a future for Abia or themselves. Papa makes Abia a crown. Why is it important to him that Abia feels like a queen? How has someone in your life crowned you or made you feel special? I don't know what we did as librarians, as community members before this book. We know that resettlement for most migrants means settling into a new language, and Dreamers so beautifully represents what can be lost in that process. The mother and son are welcome in words unlike those of our ancestors. Have you ever been surrounded by people speaking a language different from yours? How did it make you feel, or how do you imagine it feels? Do you think you become disconnected from your ancestors when you speak another language? This one I really love. It is a story from Argentina and shows us that while we can be welcoming to immigrants, we are sometimes guilty of othering people of color with the question that is the title of the book. The book features a first generation child who's repeatedly asked, "Where are you from?" Because she is a child of color. A question that can sound like you assume that a POC is just not from here. And one of the questions reads, when you meet a person who's different from you, try not to ask where you're from. Try something different. Ask someone's name and ask them the story of their name. Our names can say a lot about the countries, communities, and families we come from. Let's start now. What's the story of your name? We often start public events this way. It's a great way in a public library setting for people to start talking to one another. I just want to do, I think, one more book. When this came out last summer, I immediately sent it to our board president, Pius Ali, who is a Muslim immigrant from Ghana, and I thought he was going to love it. And I called him and he said, "I'm mad at this book." I was like, "Oh no." And then he went on to say, "This book does what I've been trying to do for my 25 years in this country, show the Muslim community as joyful and giving. It does this in 30 pages." He said, "I could not do this in 30 years." So Pius and I worked together to create questions that remove the otherness of the Muslim community's practice and reinsert the joy. This is one of those questions. And it's a mouthful on purpose. This question was once shorter for another title, but patrons and students kept asking whoever the reader was, "What's a hijab?" Which is a hard question for many people to answer, including Muslim women. So this is what we vetted with Muslim women. Many Muslim women wear headscarves. They cover for many reasons, including love of their religion, community, family, and themselves. Those scarves go by many names and vary in style by what the women believe, where they were raised, and even by what colors they like. Islam is not the only religion or culture where people cover their hair. Do you know someone who wears clothing or jewelry that is a symbol of what they love and respect? Does something you wear tell a story of where you were born or where your ancestors were born? So questions like this, just that single question, can start a conversation after a read aloud. It can also be done as an individual. That, that 60-year-old that's standing for 10 minutes reading a book can do that reflection. I think you can see by the books that we featured that they highlight the astonishing strength and resilience of our immigrant communities. And I think we so often can see immigrants through a deficit lens, that they're deficient in English or lacking in knowledge about how things work. While new families may not have yet mastered a second or third or fourth language or mastered how the checkout lane works, their deficiency is a falsehood. Reading and sharing these books show new American strengths, not deficiencies. And I wanted to tell one final story, and it's a great example of a book shifting that deficit lens. While it took place in a summer school classroom, this could have easily happened in a public library. The teacher, who had never seen or read a story about a Somali character, gathered her class to read from My Friend Jamal. Now, when she read from this spread, a boy in the class raised his hand and she interrupted her read aloud, which she said she never did, and called on him because he hadn't spoken in class the entire summer, nor, as far as she could tell, had he spoken to his classmates. He looked at her and said, "You did not read the whole page." Now the teacher looked back at the page at those white text blocks and assured him that she had read the page. She said she assumed that he had not actually grasped all of the English and was confused. But he walked up beside her, politely asked for the book, and proceeded to read from the image of the Quran that's photographed on this page. And his mastery of the Quran was so exceptional that he completed the passage even though the photograph cuts off at the end of the page. Now, there were two other Muslim students there in that classroom that knew that the boy had exhibited this incredible skill and intelligence, and they started to applaud. And because, they're third graders and awesome, all the other students joined in, and soon all the kids were on their feet cheering for this boy. And that's breaking the deficit lens, right? That's showing the strength of a dual identity, and that's one huge step towards belonging. And that's the power of access to these books. Now, the presence of the Welcoming Library does not need to change your entire programming or outreach practice. As we saw with my friend Jamal, the read aloud of a single book can change the perception of an individual, of a community. While we continue to enrich the Welcoming Library, we will just never script how you use it. You know your communities, you know your patrons best. We do, though, provide some additional tools besides the books and discussion questions. When you or the institution you might loan the Welcoming Library to opens up the red crates, you'll find a card directing you to an online toolkit. And the toolkit will offer things like a book inventory sheet, a book display assembly video, tips on loaning books, social media sharing items, and favorite lesson plans and programming guides. We welcome ideas to make this toolkit richer, stronger, including write-ups of your own best programming if you have the time. And the Welcoming Library is not the only tool that we offer. We need more teacups than that. You should know that the website database is open to you. It's now over 900 pre-K to YA immigration and new generation titles. There you can browse books by the communities the books represent, from Afghan to Somali. There are you can discover picture books and novels that are set somewhere on the immigration journey from the home country to the third generation in the new country. The site also categorizes books by over 100 cross-cultural themes, from allyship to grandparents to welcoming, allowing you to create displays, recommendations, and programs across communities. As we can, we're both creating and sharing engagement tools for these crucial titles. And a piece to keep in mind, we're also helping schools and public libraries establish larger permanent collections, what we call welcoming genres. I'm Your Neighbor Books helps the library identify what new arrival and new American books you already have on your shelves. Then we suggest additional purchases to round out representation. And then the combined collection is relocated, stickered, and presented under signage that reads, "Read to Welcome, Read to Belong." Circulation, we're still collecting circulation on these. We've only had them out about 9 months, but libraries are reporting, both in public libraries and schools, just really high circ numbers. So, you know, a multicultural nation built on immigration is here to stay, and we hope you will reach out to us with ideas and questions. And I think we can move to your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that presentation. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but now would be a great time for anybody to just unmute and ask. Do you have any questions about your collection?
I will say you probably got this news from Pam. There is a wonderful publisher in Canada called Groundwood Books. The Canadians were far ahead of the US in terms of creating some of the first multicultural, multiracial books on immigration, and 3 core titles. Groundwood's having some distribution problems, and 3 core titles are still waiting to come to you. Which titles were those, Pam?
Excuse me, it's Mustafa, 2 White Rabbits, and Somos como las nubes. Sorry, took German. And Mustafa will be coming out in the next month or so, and then the other 2, it will be coming out by the end of this year. And I believe Yuma library also is missing Storyboat, which is also being republished as we speak. So they should be in your hands probably, hopefully by January, given any non-unexpected problems.
Yeah, supply chain has not affected us until now, which is bizarre, but yes, we have. Yeah, Heather.
Yeah.
So this might be a niche question. In my library's collection, picture books are divided into categories as opposed to just straight alphabetical. And I was going to create a category specifically for the collection that we've sent. But I've been waffling between naming it the category I'm Your Neighbor versus Welcoming Library, and was wondering if you had a preference or any thoughts on that.
We don't have a personal preference, but I would say all of the libraries that have done it as I'm Your Neighbor. And I'll tell you why. The Welcoming Library, as I think the project will always be called that, but we have a really incredible partnership with a immigrant women's organization. And I remember when I was first showing Claudette, who's from Rwanda, the collection, and she said, yeah, this welcoming thing, the welcoming thing, that's your work. That's not the work that I'm doing, right? My work is to make sure that my women and families have the strengths and the skills to belong in this country. So, that's when we changed all the signage that you have. It used to say Welcoming Library on the banner. It now says Read to Welcome, Read to Belong. And that was intentional based on Claudette's brilliant feedback. And the name I'm Your Neighbor comes from the ability of anybody to say that regardless of their background.
That's super helpful, and I appreciate that perspective. That makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm under Danielle, but this is Elizabeth Hansen. I put in for the Welcoming Library. We're super excited about it. I am the teen librarian. Danielle, who is the supervisor downstairs for the younger kids, will be kind of taking it over. My question is just technical because we're both totally new at this. Do we catalog these? What do we do with them now that we receive them? Do we put them in the system, or is it like somebody please tell me what to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really, a choice your library needs to make. But I'm sure Kristen can tell us a little bit about how other libraries have done it. But also Diana has a very similar question. She wants to share them with schools. And if the items are cataloged by the library, how do others expect to loan out the kits? So any feedback you can give on cataloging versus keeping them as a collection that just kind of is named, as a entire unit?
Yeah, it is, it is absolutely up to you. The best practice we've heard from public libraries so far is treating it as a single SKU, treating it as a kit, that the two crates, the display and the individual books. So the book plate, you may want to put some of your identifying features on the back of the book. But if you're loaning it out, to schools, it is just a matter of giving it one, for a lot of libraries, it's giving it one SKU to say, Oak Grove School is checking out the Welcoming Library. They're not checking out 30 individual books from you. They're checking out the Welcoming Library. It also, Danielle, sorry.
It's both of us. It's okay.
Okay, all right. It's also a matter of how you're going to use it, right? Heather may take out those 30 books and put them on her picture book shelf. and maybe circulate them occasionally, but she wants those to be able to be on the shelf and checked out. And at that point, you're going to want to obviously catalog every individual title.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that answer so much.
Rael has a question. She would love to get some of the discussion questions for other titles that they may have in their collection already. Do you have a repository, a little place where they can download those questions and print them out and put them in their books that they already have?
Yeah, and in fact, we can do you one better. Pam has created this incredible wall in our office. The discussion questions are that you have in the back of your books are actually printed on individual labels. So we can send you individual labels that you can affix to your back end papers. And we do charge a little fee for that just because just to cover our expense. But we can send you a checklist. Just be in touch with Pam and we can send you a checklist of what we have and you can shop. And we'll just put them in a flat file. We'll also send you spine labels and cover stickers so that they look like the rest of your Welcoming Library books. And this is probably a good time to also mention that because you are all now in the Welcoming Library family, and because you're a part of that group, Pam and I will be reaching out periodically to say, we just, for example, we just this week added a Little House of Hope, which is a Cuban title. We'll be letting you know when we add a new book and when we add a new community. And as Welcoming Library subscribers, we will send you a free book processing kit. So that cover sticker, spine label, and discussion question when a new title comes out if you'd like it. So you'll have the opportunity to add more books to your collection. But if you end up, getting a complete set, we do charge a little bit just to cover all of those sticker costs, if that makes sense.
That's great. What other libraries, what are your plans for your outreach? What is one thing you're really excited to share with this group on how you're going to use this collection? Would anyone like to share?
Does anyone have any doubts about the collection, issues with it? Anything that we can improve from a user situation point of view? I know it's early days.
Yes. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? Thank you so much, Kirsten and Pam. We appreciate you joining us today and getting us more familiar with the collection.
And the project is evolving all the time, so we'll involve you in those changes, and a lot of those changes come from schools and public libraries, suggestions. So please reach out with things that worked for you outreach wise, or even with the collection. Things that worked, things didn't work. We are constantly evolving it, and we'd like to have your voice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Okay, thank you, everybody.